Hey guys, it's Maggie and I am back today and I'm really excited for this video. I think it's one that I would have found really helpful when I was younger going through this. But before I get into the video, I don't often do this or ask this, but if you like my videos, I would love if you subscribed and liked this video or follow me on Instagram. I'm also over there. Only if you feel so inclined to do so. I don't want to pressure you into that, but if you like my stuff, I would so appreciate it. All right, so today we're gonna be talking about feeling ashamed talking about your pelvic health, especially with your doctors and your nurses, because it can be sort of a taboo topic. Why is that? Why do we feel so embarrassed about it? Is it because we feel we're going to be judged, or we feel we're not going to be believed, or we just really haven't found the right caregiver to put our trust into? I want to talk a little bit about my story, kind of being very scared to share my pelvic health symptoms and what that led to and what I've learned since that has helped me really be open about it. Clearly, I have learned to be very open about it as I share it online for thousands of people to see. Anyways, roll the intro. Before getting into a bit of my story when it comes to not talking about my pelvic health and not being open about what I was experiencing, what I've come to learn over the last few years is that your pelvic floor does not just encapsulate, the bladder and the urinary system and the reproductive system. It also involves your bowels. So that is something I kind of had to reframe my brain about. And I started to learn that when I went to pelvic floor therapy, and more so as I've, kind of educated myself about it. So the pelvic floor just so deals with all of the things that people typically find embarrassing, like going to the bathroom and sex. If you're unfamiliar with my story, I have Crohn's disease, which attacks my intestinal system, but it has led to a number of other issues. So because I've had a number of surgeries that are in the pelvic floor, I had my rectum removed, I had a lot of vaginal symptoms that I didn't expect. But going back a bit, I had to have my rectum removed because I had severe Crohn's disease attack there. I had a very bad narrow spot in my rectum, so much so that it was just basically all scar tissue, did not function as it should, and I experienced this as a fairly young person. I was experiencing very embarrassing symptoms as a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old. It was awful, and because I was young, because I didn't have any education about the pelvic floor, about how bowels should be working and what isn't normal, and because I was at that ripe age of, 13, 14, I didn't want to talk about the embarrassing symptoms that I was experiencing. Because my rectum had been so damaged, I was experiencing a lot of leakage. I know, it's not fun to talk about, but that's what was happening. I dealt with severe constipation, would not go for weeks, and I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't know how to articulate it without feeling that just overwhelming, am I going to be believed? Am I going to be respected? Am I going to be judged for it? I felt very much like there was something wrong with me, and it was my fault. And again, if you're familiar with my story, you kind of know how this wound up. I wound up having to get ostomy surgery after a failed intestinal resection, that narrow spot in my rectum that I really just didn't make it known how significant the symptoms were. So I didn't really push. Again, I was 16 at the time that I got my ostomy, so I'm gonna go easy on my 16-year-old self. But still, I didn't share the symptoms like I wish I had. So, because of all of this, I wound up getting an ostomy. My rectum continued to decline, and in 2019, I got rid of that thing because it was awful. But looking back, I wonder if I'd really pushed, if I'd really said, you know what, this is what's going on. I'm having leaking, I'm having severe constipation. Could things have wound up differently? Would I have been on different medications for my Crohn's disease that maybe would have prevented some of the downfall of my rectum. I don't know. I'll never know. But it's something I want you to keep in mind as we talk about becoming more comfortable talking about your pelvic floor and the symptoms you're experiencing, because not talking about it can have potentially very severe consequences. I think the most important thing that I have found, the most helpful thing for me, is becoming comfortable with terminology. So something that I found kind of helpful, and I don't rely solely on social media sources, but following social media people like pelvic floor therapists that are active online has really helped me become more comfortable talking about it, because I'm seeing it so often. I'm on Instagram or whatever, and I'm seeing the different videos that they post with the correct terminology. It's educating me about it. And while I don't rely solely on social media, even though I'm following physical therapists and pelvic floor therapists who are 100% qualified, I always back it up with good sources. But it gives me, kind of what to look out for. But again, because I'm seeing it in my everyday life, when I go on Instagram and I'm scrolling through the feed, it's making me more comfortable kind of unknowingly with the terminology. And it's kind of making it a little bit more like everyday conversation for me. So a few accounts that I like to follow that have really helped make me more comfortable with the conversation is Align Pelvic Physio, Intimate Rose. You guys know that I work with them and have an affiliate code with them, but they're wonderful, and they have, the different pelvic floor tools. And then Vagina Coach. I know, we have to say the terms because it gets us used to it. But these are the accounts on Instagram that I follow that really just open it up for me. I'm seeing it every day, and it's making me understand. Honestly, they are the ones that really made me understand how much the pelvic floor deals with. That it's not just the reproductive system, it's not just the urinary system, it's also the GI system. Every time that I talk about my rectum being removed and the symptoms that I had with my vagina and uterus, I always get comments, those two have nothing to do with each other. Heck yeah, they do. And I like seeing the validation on these accounts where I'm like, yes, they're talking about, people having issues with constipation. People go to pelvic floor therapists when they are experiencing constipation or bowel issues. It's not just for, people who've had babies, people that are experiencing urinary incontinence. It's for a whole plethora of problems. And it's not just for females, it's for males too. I think that's so important to note that men, if you're having pelvic floor issues, please consider seeing a pelvic floor therapist. They help all of us out. Now, when we're having these pelvic floor symptoms and we want to talk to a doctor about it, it is so important to find a doctor that you trust. And even though across the board, doctors are supposed to be open and willing to help you and listen to you, obviously, it is not always the case. So finding that provider, whether it be a pelvic floor specialist, a gynecologist, or your primary care, I think it's a wonderful idea, and I really want to push you to do this. If you don't have a primary care provider that you trust, find one. That is always the first step. Find one that you can build a relationship with, that you feel comfortable with, that you trust, that you feel listens to you, because they can help advocate when it comes to all of the other doctors, specialists, whoever you may see. They can help you kind of build a new relationship with a new provider. I also think it's important to understand, even though I said not every provider does this, a majority do, they are there to help you. That is their job. And while you may be worried that they're going to judge you, that they're not going to understand what you're experiencing, first of all, remember, they got a pelvic floor too. And problems with pelvic floor health are not rare. So chances are they may have a little bit of experience in some realm with pelvic floor issues. You never know. So they understand. Also remember, they see a lot of patients who are also going through numerous issues. And what you think is super embarrassing and just taboo and oh my gosh, I can't even imagine myself telling my doctor this. This is what they hear all day long. So chances are they are not going to remember or identify you by your pelvic floor issue. When you walk in that office next time, they're not going to go, oh, that's the lady with urinary incontinence. They're dealing with many, many patients' issues. So they're used to hearing this. And their number one job is to help you. What I like to do when I have something like this going on is I will start to take notes. It's actually something that I did when I was experiencing all that dehydration and stuff. When I didn't really realize it was dehydration, I was just saying, I was fatigued and all that stuff. Before I had a conversation with a GI doctor, I wrote down all of my symptoms that I had going on, starting with the most impactful one on me to the least. I started off with, this is what I'm really having a problem with. So that way when I was on the phone having a conversation with the doctor, I was not forgetting anything, even though I was nervous. I always get nervous talking to doctors. I don't know why, but I do. It's like preparing for a presentation. That's the way I look at it. And sometimes when you're just reading, during a presentation, when you're reading off of your cue cards, maybe it doesn't sound like the best presentation, but at least you've got it in front of you and you feel a little bit less nervous because you're like, all right, I'm not going to miss anything. I'm going to hit every point that I need to. When it comes to going into the doctor talking about your pelvic floor health, there's no judgment on how you're going to present, okay? This is you trying to get your symptoms across so that they understand it. So reading off of it can be so helpful. Also, in this, be honest and be straightforward. Use the common terminology that you understand and if it's not the right terminology, your doctor should be able to help you find the right words to explain what you're going through. Be detailed so they're able to help you do this, because sometimes, like when I was having issues with the leakage before I had my ostomy, I was trying to search online for terms that I didn't really know what to look up. I didn't know what to look up. I was looking up, diarrhea happening without me wanting it to. Well, that didn't really come up with a whole lot, okay? But as time went on and I became more educated about my disease and talked to my surgeon, he's the one that gave me the ostomy, he helped me understand it's your rectum that's having the issue. You're having anal leakage from it. This is why it's happening. And it made searching for this a heck of a lot easier, and I was able to find more information online because of that. So try to give all the details that you can, and remember that I think this is probably the most important thing. Again, think about what could happen if you don't share this with a doctor, okay? Think about the negative consequences to your health, the long-term permanent things that could happen if you don't speak up, you don't advocate for yourself. Let my story be a lesson to you. Again, I gotta go easy on 16-year-old Maggie because A, she was 16 and didn't know anything about what was going on with her body, and B, was a teenager and was embarrassed to talk about it. But understand that, it can have long-term consequences for your health if you don't talk about it. And remember, there are people online like me that support you in it, and do not judge, because, hey, I've been through all of the embarrassing things. I've literally had a room full of people stare at my backside as they remove stitches, and I screamed and cried. Yes, that video is on YouTube. But I hope that this video was helpful, and if you have any more tips that make it more comfortable speaking about your pelvic health, please share them below in the comments, and yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.